Yeah. When they see my name, they're like, "Wow."
We were talking about it.
Welcome everybody to a special episode of the JHOTC podcast, and today we are doing an episode on vaccinations. With us, I am DJ Femur.
My name is your Venus. I'm your fire.
And I'm your desire.
And then our special guests today are Mr. Manning and Mr. Filiatrault. So first of all, what do you two do in the school?
Well, we're both teachers. I teach physics 11, 12, some gym, super fit. I'm the Aboriginal advocate, a bunch of different things. Sports.
Yeah, teach physical education, career learning explorations, and I have like a running club.
Wait, is that track or just running club?
It's just a running, everything. Yeah, if you want to do track, it'd be turn it into track, but my main idea is just to get people.
You just run around in circles for a bit?
Well, they're like bigger circles, but yeah.
School-size circles. School-size circles.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start off for vaccinations. How does a vaccination work?
Well, I'm not an expert on vaccinations, obviously. I have a background in immunology, in like a sort of research background, not in vaccines, but like in more transplant immunology, I guess. So, of the possible ways, sometimes they would, maybe if it's a virus that you want a vaccine against, they might take the virus and take out like part of its genetic code that allows it to be virulent, which means like infect you really well. And then they might give that to you plus something else, which is called an adjuvant. So adjuvant is like basically a way to get your immune system to recognize that there's something there that it should fight back against. And there are different adjuvants depending on like what kind of response you want. So I don't know how much you guys are aware of like how the immune system works, but there's T cells and the B cells. B cells make antibodies. So if you wanted an antibody response, there's specific adjuvants you give. And the reason for that is just like if I injected you with something and I wanted you to develop an immune response to it, if you didn't have the inflammation piece, it doesn't really work as well as if you do. So they might inject a virus, you might get an adjuvant with the vaccine injection, and then your immune system would say, hey, this is not supposed to be here. Yeah. We'll make like T cells, B cells, it'll process it, and then you'll have a specific response to whatever that thing is. So then when you get that disease, hopefully you already have antibodies which are specific to that thing. Or maybe T cells. It depends on like some vaccines you inject like what's called a live vaccine. So it is a real virus. Yeah. So and then there's other ways that they're trying to adapt, like where they would take T cells and actually put those T cells in that have memory for the disease and stuff like that. So
yeah, and some of them they even do it with like some kind of toxic materials that people come into now too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Essentially what it does is like vaccines are trying to like help your body create a defense system for that specific insult to it, right? So they give you like a dead or weakened version, right? And then your body can create, like what Mr. Manning was saying, the T cells and B cells and antibodies, so that when you do come into contact with the real thing, your body's already programmed to defeat it.
Has there been cases where the body was unable to adapt or fight said disease?
Yeah, so
well,
I mean,
don't have vaccines. Like
the HIV. Well, I guess there's quite a few diseases that don't have vaccines, but like the HIV virus is an example that we don't have a vaccine for.
Malaria, a really common one.
Yeah, malaria is like there's no vaccine for it. It's a parasite, I guess, not a virus, yeah. But those diseases, they want to develop vaccines, and there's different ways that they're trying to like treat those vaccines. For example, for HIV, there's a specific population that is immune to HIV due to they have a truncation in a gene called CCR5. It's a Northern European population, so they've done the second successful bone marrow transplant of somebody with HIV, and they've cured HIV that way. There's like the latest one is called the London patient, and then there's a Berlin patient as well that they've done that previously with before. But obviously that's pretty expensive and like kind of extreme. Yeah. So there's different ways of like dealing with immunity, but like the whole idea is, as Josh was saying, you want to like your body's pretty amazing in the sense that like you put what's called an antigen in, that's like a foreign thing, and then your body recognizes it's foreign. It makes a specific response to it. So what an antibody is like it's basically a Y-shaped thing with two ends that have a unique shape that fits to that thing that you want to get rid of. And your body tries like all sorts of different possibilities. It mixes genes together to like millions of different possibilities, like more than you could have in your genetic code because it's just randomly trying them. When one fits really well, then it says, okay, this one's really good. Let's make clones of this B cell that has those antibodies, and then now we have an army that will work against this disease. And it saves a couple. They're called memory cells. You can have memory T cells and B cells. They just float around in your body until you get infected with that thing again. And then you have a quicker response and you're less likely to have like a severe reaction to it or whatever.
Sorry, I have a question, because I know a bunch of people are anti-vax and take it seriously. As a person who works with a lot of them, without offending them, what would be the best suggestion to suggest it, especially in Canada, because the standard vaccines are free?
Yeah. Well, do we work with a lot of them? I feel like most kids in most schools, like public schools, have like very high vaccination rates.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Grade 4?
It's grade 6 and 9, and also like those are
specific,
immunizations.
yeah, when they get the
But there's stuff like the flu vaccine where a lot of people just don't get it because they're lazy. Also.
Yeah, I mean, like I guess so. The thing with vaccines is like there's lots of people say vaccines cause autism. They cause other problems like strokes or whatever. With every vaccine, there is a risk, right? Like you can get a fever, mild fever, maybe. You get some inflammation from the adjuvant or whatever, but like the risk in general is relatively low. Some people have an adverse reaction to the vaccines, but like it's kind of like a cost-benefit thing, right? Like vaccines are probably the most effective way that I think they are the most effective way that we can control disease, like better than soap. Washing your hands.
Because usually, like if people do have complications with it, it's usually because they have abnormalities with B cells in their body to begin with, or like existing conditions that make them more susceptible.
Yeah, sometimes
like
just an allergic reaction, or if you have like weakened immunity already, then you potentially could have a problem with vaccine, which is kind of like, I mean, with the flu vaccine, like mostly they recommend kids and old people, so like that. Those are two populations that do have weakened immunity besides,
like, and people that work with them, right? So teachers, that's what they.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I will confess, I don't get the flu vaccine, and if you work in a hospital, you have to get it. People feel different ways about it because I think there's over 20 variants of like the common flu virus, right? And they pick the 3 that they think we're gonna get this year. And then you get immune to that. But we could get other ones. It's just like a kind of probability thing based on what they've seen in the past. So you might get the vaccine and then there's a different flu virus this year and you get sick anyway. So some people say, well, what's the point? Then I'll just get sick.
Yeah, because it happened in 2017, I believe, where they gave out the wrong one, like the majority wrong ones, and a lot of people got the flu anyways, even though they did get the vaccines.
Yeah.
So,
but if you're like, I could see if you're in a high risk occupation, like you work in a hospital, or you
child minding.
Or you work like at old folks home. I mean that it is a risk to get a vaccine, very small, but you probably should for the old people as well, right? Because you know, like Josh might get the flu, but he works in an old folks home. He's helping old people, and then he passes that flu on to them. It could be much more severe for them than it would be for him.
That kind of naturally goes into like the herd immunity aspect of it too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's like, especially if you're in like herd immunity, obviously it's like a threshold amount of the population is vaccinated, right? Well then the vaccine, if you get infected, it kind of stops with you, right? Like it decreases your ability to like carry it on, which means that you can't create, like you disrupt chains of infection, right? But in specific cases, like where you do have people with like compromised immune systems, elderly, youth, what have you, if you do get that, then you can stop that chain of infection, or at least prevent that chain of infection from happening, which allows you to protect other people, right?
So just list the pros, compare it how it majorly outweighs the negatives, and without calling them lazy.
No, okay, I meant like so I meant people like myself who we know there's a flu vaccine, like it's out there, and like I probably should get it to stop myself from getting the flu, but I just won't get it because I am a lazy person and I don't want to go to the clinic to get the vaccine. That's what I meant by calling them lazy.
And I feel like lots of people probably, when it comes just to like the annual flu, they see it as such a like a low stakes, I think, as opposed to like bigger vaccinations that you already talked about, right? Like measles, mumps, and rubella are kind of like a different class of like compared to the normal flu, like if you're like a younger, healthy person, right?
So they're just not aware.
Well, I think it's just that people probably do like a risk analysis and say like, I don't know, like I'm X amount of years old, I've never had the flu, I don't come into contact with, like for teachers, it's like, yeah, maybe we should get it because we come into contact with probably thousands of people a day, right, at a school. But imagine if you just work from home and never had the flu and are like relatively healthy, so you like, you know what I mean? Or someone who like drives to work, works in a cubicle versus someone who like takes transit every day, right? Like if you're taking transit every day, you might be like, maybe I'll get this vaccination because I'm going to be riding a bus or a SkyTrain that's going to have like hundreds, thousands of people on it a day, right? So people probably do like different analysis when it comes to something that they perceive to be less risky, whereas like the other like side of the argument, like in terms of like bigger vaccinations, like measles, mumps, and rubella, like well those can have like dire certain like consequences for certain people, right?
Yeah, like infertility or like what are we were talking about? What was the one they had vaccinated before where you could get like paralyzed?
Polio?
Polio, thank you.
Were you guys around during the time of polio?
No, we weren't around.
I remember it like in the
1840s.
Yeah.
growing up on the farm.
Because we have the frost and Mr. Filiatrault from the ice.
Yeah.
America.
Yeah, so I mean, some diseases like you can have serious implications if you don't get vaccinated, right? Or even some I mean like diseases that if you get it, maybe you get infected one time, it's not that bad, and then the next time you get infected, it's really bad. Or there's some things like that we'd like to have a vaccine for that we can't. Like I'm trying to think, what's the outbreak that happened in like West Africa last year? Not the Zika virus. Ebola. Like they'd love to have a vaccine for Ebola, but like very rarely are people able to develop an immune response so we can even understand like what the Ebola virus looks like. We don't want to give Ebola to people because they'll die right away, right?
Yeah. And like, testing around with all those things, we're probably like,
yeah. Or like HIV has. I mean, I worked with people at SFU who work on HIV. They're trying to develop HIV vaccine, but HIV has like a really unique coat that like makes it difficult to generate an antibody response to it. So some viruses and like different pathogens make it difficult for you to generate certain vaccines. So we have to come up with other ways potentially.
I'm not too aware about the whole biochemistry area, but are vaccines like antibiotics where they're slowly going extinct?
No. So the idea with most vaccines is that like I'm going to give, okay, so let's say a virus is in my body, an actual disease. My body is going to generate a response specific to that virus, not to any other viruses, so that if I get infected with it again, I will remove it. So like now I have, like an antibody might be specific for that virus. So it's different than like if I gave you antibodies from me, like let's say I've had polio. And I survived polio, and now my immune system is like, I'm immune to polio. If I give you my antibodies, you'll be protected for a while, but it's not the same as if you get like a polio vaccine and then you generate your own response to polio. That is like an immune response.
That literally happens through breast milk.
Yeah.
In the first year, that's why so like the mother can pass on the antibodies to the child, which is like super cool.
If you say they pass it down, does that mean it's not hereditary, as in like not from birth, you get those?
No, they would just pass the antibodies, I think, through
the milk, and then I also was, apparently my wife was just reading that you also, like, I guess some get transferred to the baby through the placenta. But yeah, so that's one of the reasons why people are supportive of breast milk, because it has all these like defensins and like cytokines, interleukins, and things that protect your body, as well as antibodies that come from your mother. So like if your mother was protected against a particular disease, the baby might also be protected for the disease by taking the IgA, which is antibody type, in the breast milk, by drinking it. So if you didn't do that, then you wouldn't be as protected if you just had formula. Yeah. But you also get some like before, even if you didn't drink breast milk
too, right? Like,
yeah. So the reason
like a period of time, and then that's why they have like the timing for vaccinations. Like, what do you get? Measles, mumps, rubella.
I don't know.
I think it's a year, right? Like usually it's around 1 year that they get.
Yes, you get that at 1 year. Like there's certain vaccines they get to kids.
Protected up until the 1 year.
And And I mean, it also depends. Like when up until I think 3 months, kids' immunity is like really limited. So during that time, like we try to keep kids away from somebody who's sick and coughing, and like if they're drinking breast milk, they'd be a little bit more protected than if they weren't. And because your immunity is still developing, and then as it develops, they give them vaccines like there's I think 2 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and you get. And some of those vaccines are live vaccines. So what that means, like the rotavirus vaccine, is an actual virus. It's just been like weakened, so it's not as virulent and not able to affect you as much. But for certain things, you have to have an actual virus because, like, let's say you want a T cell response to it, you don't want B cells. So then you have to get your cells infected, and then the cells are going to present the antigen of the virus, and then your body's going to be like, oh, okay, this is an infected cell. This is what it looks like. I will get rid of this cell. Whereas if you just gave like a floating protein of a virus, then it's not going to be the same because it's not in the context of the disease.
Yeah. So unlike antibiotics, we just need to use the vaccines like a couple times, and we can just spread it on naturally.
And
like I guess the difference between antibiotics and vaccines is
antibiotics are used more for bacterial infection.
Definitely only for bacterial infections, and also it's like you use it, and then once it's metabolized by your body, it's no longer effective. But theoretically, the bacteria is already gone. The vaccine idea is like we're boosting your immunity up here.
It's like trains your body.
Yeah. So your body is trained to like fight against that thing. Should you get it
It
again?
used to be like the memory cell difference, right? Like
So scarcity would not be a problem.
No. So I mean, the reason vaccines are great is because like you give somebody one thing one time, and theoretically, like they have like they've looked at people in that are 80 years old and they have memory cells from a disease that they got when they were like 6. That's not the same for all diseases. Like the common flu, obviously, you can't get the flu, all the different variants of the flu. Sometimes it mutates, and for whatever reason, we don't keep like the response high to it. But certain diseases, you can have memory until you're like, until you die.
Well, it's like if you use antibiotics, right? You might use an antibiotic that helps you get defeat one bacterial infection. But bacteria, like if one survives, they just mutate exponentially so fast, right? And then like the more mutations you have, the more likely you are to have like a mutation of like that bacteria, which then creates a new variant of that bacteria, which now your body does not have memory cells to help defeat that one. So then you're sick, but then you use the same one, but then this bacteria, like the 1 in a million, is different, and boom.
And it grows.
It doesn't, that bacteria is
so
not effective.
that's why like your doctor might say, okay, you need to take even if you're feeling better, you need to take this full dose of antibiotics because you need to make sure that like all the bacteria are dead. Because if some survive, then
it's too many.
Some like bacteria multiply really fast, right?
Yeah.
So if some survive and they're actually resistant to that antibiotic, then as Josh was saying, they're going to multiply and grow, and like now your antibiotic doesn't work on the bacteria, so you have to take another one. So
and you spread it, and then someone else, and
so you don't want to use antibiotics when you don't need them, and then you also need to finish the dose so that you make sure you
kill all
wipe that bacteria
That's why
out.
it's like sometimes might feel better even like really quickly on antibiotics, but like have that full dosage. It's like you got to take it.
It's not for you; it's for other people mostly.
Yeah.
Because if we can't kill all bacteria, just protect the people who are going to experience them in the future. Might as well.
Say that again.
Sorry. So instead of just, since we can't kill all bacterias with antibiotics, and we're running out of them, might as well just protect the people who are going to be born soon.
Well, I mean, I guess they're two separate things.
Yeah,
that we're
they're
talking
separate.
about.
Vaccinations are more defense
Yeah.
than attacking.
Yeah, so vaccinations, the idea is like preventative, whereas antibiotics is more like after you've been infected, to try and like speed your immune system's removal of that thing. So you could not, I mean, you're going to generate an immune response when you get infected with something. Your body will hopefully eventually, like unless it compromises it to an extreme degree, will develop an immune response and get rid of that bacteria without antibiotics. Antibiotics will speed up that process, or like in some people who don't have an immune system that works very well, that will help them because they can actually get rid of that bacteria themselves.
So like, the not all bugs need drugs kind of advertisements that you would see, that's more so about like, if it's not a big thing, they want people just to kind of like try and take care of themselves because your body's immune system is pretty resilient. It should be able to beat it. And then, whereas if you use those antibiotics and you don't use them correctly, then you're risking the fact of creating mutated versions and now making obsolete antibiotics. that's kind of like
And
the
then
not all
other
bugs
people
need
can't
vaccines
use them.
because of that. They want to keep the antibiotics we have to be useful for people that do have
Yeah.
compromised immune systems.
Rather than just
right?
minor things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a PSA. Wash your hands, please, JH
Yeah.
students. Hot water is like 1/3 of the battle.
Yeah, I think clean water is half the battle. Yeah.
So-
Yeah, half. I'm wrong.
So in schools they teach us bugs need drugs, but now they're coming out with Kids Boost Immunity by UNICEF. So Mr. Filiatrault, can you explain that? to
So
us?
Kids Boost Immunity is like just a website, right? kidsboostimmunity.com. It's through UNICEF. Kids can go on there, has online like learning modules. You do the modules, which are like little lessons, so it teaches you the stuff. Like you have the questions you're asking, you could hypothetically, we could have all made accounts on Kids Boost Immunity and just gone through some modules and learned this stuff. You do little quizzes at the end. If you get 80% on the quiz, you earn a vaccination for, like UNICEF will then can give a vaccination to someone somewhere else in the world where it's more needed, right?
So they're locking vaccinations for kids who don't get 80%.
So the thing is like you can just, no one's stopping you from redoing and
Okay.
redoing, right? So that kind of I think is just like that little bit of the learning motivation. So that not, I guess the project, because they want to increase vaccinations for people, but obviously they're a charitable foundation, so they're getting money from sponsorships, right? So you create that 80% threshold just so hey, one kid does it, they get 50. Well, they'll do it again and get 80, but so then they actually might learn something about vaccinations and then also earn a vaccination. So then by learning about vaccinations, think about when those kids grow up and have kids, do you think they're gonna be anti-vax or pro-vax, right? So it's trying to like kind of create people to be aware of that. So as we grow up here and we have free vaccinations, we know, hey, I could get my kid a vaccination, and by getting you're vaccinating your own children in the future because you're aware now, and then you're also earning vaccinations for other people.
Because the vaccines do not go to the person who like answers.
They do
the
not go to that
questions,
person. They go through UNICEF to somewhere in the world, like a place of need where they don't have it. Because like in Canada, we have.
in general free
Yeah,
vaccinations
yeah,
unless
vaccinations.
you're going somewhere specific.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like for things like measles, mumps, and rubella, and whatnot,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
that one you can get for free.
Yeah. So it's more so about raising awareness, but I think it's because they do want it to be educational for the people as well. But what's the cost but time to go through it? You know what I mean? So if you look on their website, it has like a little like scoreboard of it. So some classes have answered way more questions but have less vaccines. But that just means like they just keep on going at it, right? Like so for example, if you look, my wife's class, her and two of her teaching partners are the top 3 in Canada by about like 100 vaccinations each. It's just 3 classes in a small North Surrey school, right? And they've answered, if you look at it, like every class has answered over like 13,000 questions. So they're all little mini experts on vaccinations now, right? And they'll just go and redo it because there's like that competitive element. They love it, but now they're like all super into it. If I went there and said something about like anti-vax, I'd probably get it from those kids. You know what I mean? Like
It's like the vaccination form of the Canadianathon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. For sure.
And I hate to cut you guys off, but
Yeah.
Mr. Manning and Mr. Filiatrault have made promises, and we don't want to
Yeah.
break them. So if there's anything to take away from this, it's one, there are pros and cons, mainly pros, when it comes to vaccinations. They're free in Canada because we're privileged, and there's also a test people are taking for free vaccinations. And the last thing, Mr. Filiatrault is a superhuman who can balance teaching, marking papers, and working at the retirement home at the same time. So props to you.
And running around
What?
circles for a bit.
I don't work at a retirement home.
Well, without the retirement home, he still runs around
Yeah,
circles
yeah.
for a bit, and that's pretty impressive.
Cool.
So, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Join the running club.
Check out kidsboostimmunity.com. It's a fun time.
We'll put it in the link below.
And that's all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
done.
much.
Thank you guys.